Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Zenless Zone Zero video. Today we're going to be going over a brief overview of combat. This is going to be just really high level. You're not going to get in the weeds here. I think in order to do that the right way, I need to go over each individual character because it kind of ties in to their kit, where they should be used, team composition, all of those things. But for someone who's just starting out and is a little bit confused by the combat, that's what we're going to be going over here today. I'm going to try and keep the video, under 20 minutes, hopefully, and just walk you through some of this stuff, okay? So for those of you who did not see my beginner's guide, most of you probably didn't. I'm a smaller channel, but if you tuned into this, I will go over this briefly. In the game, you have your agents, and each agent has an attribute tied to them, which you see on Kaleda here. She has the fire attribute, and then she also has, this little subtype next to her. Hers is stun. So each hero has their own attribute, and then they also have a subtype. These are really important when it comes to team compositions. There are some enemies that are weak to, like, let's say, electric or ice, but they have a resistance to ether or fire. The game does show you these things, so you need to pay attention to that. But the subtype plays into combat a little bit more than what the main type can do, because the main attribute type is really straightforward. If you see somebody is weak to fire, then you're like, oh, okay, I'll choose a fire hero. But the attack, stun, support, all of that stuff it pertains to that agent's kit. So we're going to walk through the actual stats of Ellen here to kind of give you a baseline of what you should be looking for and how those subtypes kind of play in. So just a quick comparison. So you see Ellen has an attack subtype, and everything in here is just really high attack stats. You might have some decent crit damage, crit rate, and then you go to Kaleda. Now, Kaleda's attack stat is less than Ellen's by a decent amount, but the big thing that Kaleda has over Ellen is her impact stat, right? And that pertains to her stun subtype, where on Nicole, her support subtype highlights the energy regen stat, and so on and so forth for each of these, individual heroes. So we're going to talk about that when we go into the stats. So let's talk about that briefly, and then we're going to jump into training, and I'm just going to show you all of the skills, what they mean by those skills, and then I'm going to get out of here. So the stats, in detailed stats here, show the attribute of what your hero is. And if your hero is an ice hero like Ellen, she can do ice damage. Now, she doesn't do it on her baseline attacks. There's ways to enable attribute damage. But again, we'll kind of mention that whenever we go into each individual character, because that's kind of important. But I will say that ice damage, fire damage, electric damage, it usually comes into play by activating some kind of skill within the hero's ability, maybe a special attack or an ultimate attack, and then you're able to actually activate ice damage or attribute damage. So this stat is just telling you, because Ellen is an attack subtype, she's going to be doing a lot more raw damage. Attack subtype heroes tend to have, worse HP or defense stats than other heroes because they specialize in damage and not survivability. It just mentions here briefly about the HP, attack, and defense. Now, the first important stat that we get to is the impact stat, which I showed on Kaleda versus Ellen, where Kaleda's impact stat is much higher. So this game has something called a daze bar. Now, the daze bar is right underneath the enemy's health. And whenever that daze bar gets full, the enemy becomes stunned. It can't move. And on top of that, they get additional damage done to them. So those two big things are part of the daze bar. On top of that, while your opponent or your enemy, is stunned, you can enable what the game calls a chain attack, which we'll talk about in the skills and we'll show in the basic training. So the impact stat should not go unnoticed. A lot of times in these games, people just want to do a bunch of damage, and they think if the character isn't an attack subtype hero that they're going to be worthless. But trust me, stun heroes are important because they fill up that daze bar really quick, which allows your team to do way more damage. So all this substat is telling you is the efficiency of how quickly you will fill up that daze bar. So if Ellen is attacking an enemy, the daze bar will go up slower than if Kaleda is attacking the enemy. Now these stats are just, raw stats that pertain to your gear. So my Ellen does have some decent crit rate and crit damage. The next thing are anomalies. So an anomaly is an attribute-based damage bar. This bar goes up based on the amount of damage that you're doing from attributes. So ice damage, fire damage, electric damage. And once you get up to full on this bar, an anomaly happens. And it depends on which attribute has been filled. If it's ice, you have an ability that takes place where the enemy freezes, and then after a while, the freeze shatters and deals additional damage. With electric abilities, they get something called shock. With fire, they burn. That's what that is. And this mastery talks about the efficiency similar to impact, how quickly you fill up that bar. So that's all that is. Very similar to the impact bar, the impact substat with the daze bar, the anomaly mastery with the anomaly bar. Now, the anomaly proficiency is once that anomaly takes place, right, whenever the bar is full, the amount of damage that you will do from the anomaly is what anomaly proficiency is. So if this is higher, your shatter, for instance, on ice will be much higher than if it's lower than 105. Now, your pen ratio talks about ignoring a certain percentage of the target's defense. So if this pen ratio, say, is 10%, every time you attack the enemy, you're ignoring 10% of their defense. The higher this goes, the better. Flat pen is just the kind of opposite of pen ratio. Instead of ignoring a percentage of the enemy's defense, you're ignoring a flat amount of defense. So in this case, only 12. I think they go hand in hand, so they're additive. Basically, you're ignoring 10% of the enemy's defense while also ignoring 12 additional base flat stats of their defense. I think that's how that works. So energy regen, this is how much energy you recover per second in combat, and energy ties to the special EX ability of each character, which we'll talk about here briefly. So if this is higher, you're going to get energy quicker, and you're going to be able to use your special EX skills quicker and more often. The generation rate is how quickly or efficient your energy regen is. And then your energy limit is the maximum amount of energy you can have. I don't know if this is actually more or less on other characters, but for Ellen, it's 120. Once she hits 120, her energy is maxed, and it will stay there until you actually use your special EX ability, which does burn energy. It's required for it. You also have these other substats. So within your gear, you have the ability to have a stat that ties into your attribute damage. But because Ellen isn't wearing any gear that increases her ice damage per se, it's not located here. Okay, so those are the stats. What we're going to go over whenever we go into the training is just these 5 attack skills underneath. You have your basic attack, you have a dodge, you have a quick assist, you have a special attack and an EX special attack, and then you have your ultimate ability. So within this, you can see that there are kind of like subtypes of this. So for dodge, you have regular dodge, you have a dash attack, and then you have a dodge counter. I'm going to go through all of those things. I'm not going to talk about like each individual one for Ellen or for Kaleda. I'm just going to go over it like how you know it's a dodge counter, how you know it's a dash attack, how you know it's a quick assist or a defense assist, how you know if it's an assist follow-up. That's what we're going to talk about. And then also special attack versus EX special attack, and then chain attacks. So without further ado, let's jump into the combat. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so our first example here is just your basic attack. You're hitting square, and it's the most common, move that you'll use. You can hit it multiple times to, further that attack, and that's all we're showing here. Some heroes might also have other ways to enhance that basic attack, like with Ellen here. If you press the button 3 times and then hold it, she does an additional attack where she kicks her weapon. So utilize that as well. Okay, so the next move is your regular special attack, which you can use with the triangle button. You see how it's not highlighted there, but at the top left, you can see a bar that just lit up actually right underneath your hero's HP. Once that happens, the button on the bottom right actually lights up and you're able to then do something called an EX special attack. Okay, so this is just a dodge. You don't actually have to dodge an enemy to activate dodge. You just need to hit the dodge button. So next up is a dash. This is whenever you're going to double tap your dodge button, and it kind of puts Ellen here at least in a roaming state. This helps her perform other attacks. So double tapping that dodge ability allows her to go into that roaming state. So that roaming state is important because then it allows Ellen to do this type of dash attack. So she needs to be in the roaming state first in order to be able to do that dash attack. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is a perfect dodge. You need to understand what a perfect dodge is first before you can actually perform what the game calls a dodge counter. So in order to perform perfect dodge, you have to wait for this little light to light up from an enemy attack, and as soon as you do, you hit your dodge button. Things slow down, and that signifies that you have performed a perfect dodge. So now that you know how to do a perfect dodge, now you can dodge counter. So as soon as you perfect dodge, you hit the basic attack button, and that performs your dodge counter. This is really nice for a couple of reasons. One, it does good damage, and two, it actually fills up the daze bar a lot quicker than just what a basic attack would. Okay, so these next couple things, you actually need some team members. And the first one we're going to go over is a defensive assist. This is where, whenever the enemy is right about to attack you, you hit your R1 button and hit the assist button. This allows you to do a defensive assist. This increases the daze bar on your enemy, and it also avoids you from taking damage. So next up is an assist follow-up. This is where after you perform a defensive assist, you can then hit the basic attack button and you do like a follow-up counter attack. Okay, so this next one is a quick assist. So if you take damage, like if you miss a dodge or whatever, you can then follow up after you've been pushed back with the same button, the assist button, the R1 button on the controller, and you can jump in and do this quick assist ability, but it's only whenever you're pushed back. You'll see a little thing pop up right there. That's a quick assist. Okay, so this next move is a chain attack. What happens is you bring in all 3 heroes to attack. You can only actually do this, though, if the daze bar is full. So once the daze bar is full on the enemy, if you keep hitting him, you will then activate these chain attacks where all 3 of your heroes come in, and they just do these massive attacks on the enemy. So last thing on the docket, guys, is your ultimate ability. You need to acquire 3,000 decibels. That's actually the number on the left there. Once you do that, then your ultimate ability will then become available to you. All you have to do is hit the ultimate ability button, and your hero is going to do it. Then your decibels will reset. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment section below. Appreciate it. Catch you on the next one. See ya.